Welcome back to the Customer Support Agent tutorial. This is the third video in the series, and you can find links to the playlist and the previous videos in the description. In this video, we'll be dealing with that unhappy scenario where we need to escalate the customer query to a human because the agent was unable to respond to it. So here we are back at the Flow editor. Again, I've reorganized things a little bit just for clarity, but it's just for visual flair. There's two main logic components we'll be looking at today. The first one is categorization. This is something that Noxus and AI in general excel at. We have a customer query come in, which we were unable to respond to automatically, and we want to escalate it to a human team. That being said, we know our company organizes itself by a specific set of teams, and we want to make sure we categorize the query accordingly so that we direct it straight to the correct people. To get started with categorization, I'll add an AI node called SmartRoute. Same as we've seen before, this is a node that can take several inputs, and we'll actually set up two for it. The first one will just be the when false path coming out of our condition node. As a reminder from last video, this is basically the path that the flow will follow when we do need human review for our agent response. I'll connect that to our first input and call it response. And I'll actually also pass in our original customer query as our second input for SmartRoute. I'll call it query. Now we can actually use both of these inputs on our SmartRoute configuration, which we'll look at now. We can see for SmartRoute, we can set up as many routes as we'd like on the outputs. You can see the Add Routes button here at the bottom. And basically we can specify the condition under which the flow should follow each of these paths. In our case, we'll basically be interested in setting up as many output paths as we have categories and specifying the conditions under which we should follow each of those paths. The billing guidelines and FAQ page really circle around two main topics, which are billing and account access. So we can set up output paths for SmartRoute for each of these and specify the condition under which the flow should follow each of them. So here's the first one. I'll go ahead and name this one billing. And for the condition, as we just discussed, I'm just going to ask whether the customer query relates to billing. So again, really simple stuff in the condition. You can also specify the output, as you can see, which is basically the value we'll have flowing out of this connector in our flow, which we can use further down the line. Because we already know the whole point of this node is to set things up so that a human can have a look, we can already phrase this output as the context we'll be providing to the person which will be analyzing the customer query. So we can type up something like. So you can see here that the value in the output, that is the text which we'll be providing and make usable further down the line in the flow, is just a couple of lines first pointing out what the customer query is and then what the response the agent came up with is. This way, the human can basically look at what the agent got wrong, what they got right, tailor a final response, and ship it forward. Let's set up just about the same thing for account access. So I'll scroll down and name this account access. The condition is going to be very similar. I'll actually copy that. But I'll make it specific to account access or passwords. The output will be the exact same for account access, so I'll just copy that verbatim. Let's leave that node for now. So now we've made it so our flow branches out depending on which category the customer query fits under. What we can do next, as the little post-it note here suggests, is set up the actual node which will be responsible for bringing a person into the loop. To do that, I'll add in the human review node. Let's connect one of our paths to this human review node. Let's say billing. Let's call the input context because that's really what we've made it out to be. This includes both the original query and the response the agent has come up with. And let's look at the configurations for this node. When we flow into a human review node, we'll be essentially creating a task for a person to have a look at. You can see that we can define a lot of things about this, namely what the title is for the task, what's the description so that the person knows what they're looking at, what they're supposed to deal with, and a few other settings such as priority, who the default assignee should be when the flow comes into this node, and finally, form fields, This is where we can specify what the output of the task will be. Is the person just supposed to fill in a form field, tick a box? This is where we set that up. So let's scroll back to the top. We've connected the billing path to this, so let's make this specific about billing. Call it a billing query. As far as the task description goes, this is basically the text we'll be providing the person so that they know what they need to accomplish. Because we already made it so the output of the smart root node is this structured piece of text containing the original customer query and the response coming from the agent, we already essentially have a neatly structured piece of context that we can just pass on to the person that will be looking at this. So I'll just add that variable as the full description of this task. I scroll down, I can go ahead and set the default assignee to be myself. This is optional. And as far as the form fields go, we essentially want to specify that we want a single text field, which is what we'll be sending out back to the client. This will be text. You can call it final. Close that for now. Let's set up the exact same thing for account access. I can actually copy this node, drag it down here. And the one thing I'll change is that task title. I'm keeping things very simple and similar for now, but you can see how we would be able to specify different business processes for each of these flow paths. Let's scroll out a little bit now. We've basically made it so we have either an automatic response coming out, which we're happy with, or these human review tasks that we flow into. Ultimately, we know that our response back to the client will be one of these. To bring it all together, we can use an auxiliary node called join path, which we'll use to bring all of these outputs together. I'll delete this one for now and connect it into our node. And I'll add inputs for each of our review tasks. Finally, I'll connect this output back to our email body. Before we move away from the flow editor and into tests, we need to consider an important detail which we also discussed briefly last video. Right now, when our flow is triggered by an email coming in, we'll be running the specific static version in time which we saved at the end of the last video. To make sure that future triggered runs reflect the changes we just done, we have two options. We can either override our previous version using this button here, or we save a new version for which we set up a trigger. I've saved a new version, so I'll go with that, but they're both the same. I'll go to triggers, select my existing one, and I'll just have it use v2 instead. Everything else remains the same. And I'll go ahead and save and close that for now. So let's move on to some tests. We've been over the happy path plenty of times by now, so we're really interested in the scenarios where we know we'll end up at one of these human review tasks. So that is when a query comes in that the agent is unable to respond to autonomously, and said query relates to either billing or account access. Obviously, there's other categories, and we could have set up an exit or other path, but we're keeping things fairly simple for now. Let's try something about billing. If we look at our guidelines here, we can see that customers are supposed to receive clear and itemized invoices for every billing cycle. Let's ask whether we allow for specific or bespoke billing cycles, which the agent should be completely lost on. I'll compose an email for that. Here's my email. You can see that I'm asking about quarterly or monthly billing cycles and what the flexibility is, which are very specific questions to which the agent does not have enough context. That being said, it should be able to pick up on this being a billing question. If we go back to our editor flow page and to past runs, you can see the run that came out of our incoming email. I'll click into that. Here's the question. And if we scroll down, you can see that this task is pending human review. Now, obviously, we do not want to come into each flow to see what tasks we have, and that's not the experience as well. I'll close this for now, and I'll navigate back to the home page. You can see here under Task Manager that I have a new task, which we can see corresponds exactly to what we set up in the flow. You can see that its title is Bill Enquiry, which corresponds to the title we set up for tasks that relate to this category. And we can also see the structure we set up in the node, with the lead up phrase lining up the customer query, and this other sentence just showing us what the agent came up with. At the end of which we can see that same string we're looking for in our condition that we need human review in this scenario. Let's scroll down. And we can see that we can submit a final response, which we will be sending out to the customer. There we go, simple enough. And I'll hit submit. Let's actually go ahead and see the run. And if we look at progress, we can actually see all of the nodes we went through. Let's look at human review, for example, where we can see our result, which is the response which we actually typed out. And if we look at send email, we can see that the input for body is what we have typed out in the task. I'll close that and have a look at my actual inbox, where we can see the response that I actually typed up in the task and not the response coming from the agent. That's going to be it for this video. There's obviously a lot we can change here to make it specific to our needs, but all of the basic functionality is here at this point. We're monitoring an email inbox autonomously. We're generating response automatically based on our specific data. And we're either sending those out immediately or escalating it correctly to the specific team when they need human review. In the next and final video, we'll be setting up knowledge ingestion, which you can think of as a feedback loop of sorts, so that our agent is able to learn from human inputs over time and become capable of autonomously responding to emails it wasn't able to originally. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.